WrestleHavoc Podcast on YouTube, where we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. We talk all that goes on in the realm of WWE and AEW every week. And now, here's your host, the one that will give you a reality check on pro wrestling, Flamin' Ricky DeReyes. This is the WrestleHavoc Podcast.
What's up, everybody? It is Flamin' Ricky DeReyes, right here on the episode 3 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast, right here on YouTube. What a week it has been in the realm of World Wrestling Entertainment. Vince McMahon is officially back as executive chairman, and all the news on the potential sale of WWE. Saudi Arabia is probably interested in WWE. A lot of crazy shit has gone down this past week, and it really all started since Tuesday. Now, we all knew about Vince McMahon wanting to come back. I'm going to be dissecting the entire Vince McMahon quote-unquote situation from top to bottom, or I should say from what we know then, up till now. This is going to be a very special episode because we do not know what the future of WWE is going to be or what is going to look like. We do not know if Vince McMahon is going to come back to the creative chair. Hopefully, I pray to God not. But he is now voted, or I should say unanimously voted, as executive chairman of the board of directors. And it leaves a sour taste, in my opinion, in my mouth, considering the fact that Vince McMahon, even after all the allegations that this man has went through, this man has been plotting this whole thing the entire time. Vince McMahon was like, fuck retirement. I'm going to come back and basically run the company because I have nothing else to do with my life. That is basically Vince McMahon. And overall, it's not looking good if you're a fan of WWE at all. Now, is this a scenario in which the company will ever go out of business? No. I tend to believe that WWE will never go out of business because it is number one, it's a publicly traded company. But number two, WWE makes so much money and revenue, it's absolutely insane. They will never, ever, ever go out of business. And nobody wants them to go out of business. Why would you want WWE to go out of business, considering the fact that if WWE goes out of business, this whole business goes to shit? But yeah, man, we're going to be talking about Vince McMahon because this story, all the layers of this story is absolutely crazy. We have Stephanie voluntarily resigning from WWE. She put out an official statement. All of a sudden, hours later, a bombshell rumor comes out that WWE has been sold to Saudi Arabia. What the hell is going on? Honestly, what the hell is going on? But before I get into all this craziness regarding Vince McMahon, the sale of WWE, and what the future holds of WWE, make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc Podcast right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the frickin' referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, the WrestleHavoc Podcast is also available on audio platforms. It is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts. So if you guys want to check out the WrestleHavoc Podcast in audio format, it is available on all of those platforms. Of course, I stated on the SmackDown review that I haven't been uploading on the audio platforms on Anchor, Spotify, all those other platforms, but I recently uploaded those previous reviews that I recently uploaded throughout the past 2 weeks. So it's now up on those audio platforms, so if you guys want to give them a listen, go right ahead. Also, one thing that I want to do with this channel is consistency. I really want to grow this channel because I'm very passionate when it comes to professional wrestling, and I want to show you guys my passion and give you guys more content right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. So right now I have a schedule that I want to do. This will be the main podcast. Of course, this is episode 3 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast. On Tuesday, we will do the Raw review. On Thursday, we will do the Dynamite review. And on Saturday, we will be uploading the SmackDown review. Pay-per-views tend to be on a Saturday or Sunday, but of course, now with the Ring of Honor pay-per-view just announced, which is going to be, I believe, on Friday, March 31st, things could possibly change at the moment, but this is the main WrestleHavoc Podcast. This is the main show that we'll be having every Sunday, and I'm definitely excited to give you guys my thoughts on all things professional wrestling right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Also, follow me on social media on Twitter and Instagram at FlaminRick0305. The links will be in the descriptions below as well. So, let's get started with this whole Vince McMahon story because there's layers to all this type of stuff. We do not know what is true, and at the same time, we do not know what is true. It is a weird, and crazy situation, and it not only has the entire wrestling community talking, but it also has mainstream media talking. We don't know what the hell is going on in WWE. It's gone to the point where after that rumor that came out about Saudi Arabia possibly buying WWE, we now have talent that is possibly worried as well. But we're going to move back. We're going to go back. We're going to go through our little time machines, and we're going to go back to December of last year. Yes, the final month of what has been a crazy year, that being 2022. Of course, the big story of 2022 that happened this past summer was the Wall Street Journal leaking information, or I wouldn't say leaking information, but putting out information about Vince McMahon and the allegations of the hush money scandal. Of course, John Laurinaitis was also a part of those allegations as well. And that led, a couple of weeks later, to the resignation of Vince McMahon. Because people think that Vince McMahon got fired. No, Vince McMahon did not get fired. Vince McMahon voluntarily resigned. And, of course, that led to Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan becoming co-CEOs, but also Triple H gaining the helm and gaining the reins of head of creative. And that was a joyous moment in the history of WWE. That was probably the best decision WWE has ever made in their 50-plus year history, in my opinion, because let's be 100% honest with ourselves. Vince McMahon, at 77 years old, was completely, I don't care if he still loved to do it, he was completely out of touch with the product that he put out. I can't tell you how many times back in 2021 have I been on this channel and absolutely trashed Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw has gone to the point where it had become the worst show, not only in wrestling, but the worst show in television, period. Now, granted, has Raw become better, even under Triple H? I'm going to give you the God's honest answer. No, it hasn't become better. Now, has it been better than Vince McMahon? Yes. But when it comes to quality of the show, honestly, I genuinely believe that Raw is very difficult to watch, not really because of the creative, but because of the fact that the show is just 3 hours. Now, SmackDown has benefited greatly off of Triple H. SmackDown is on the verge to becoming the best wrestling show of the week. Is it there yet, in my opinion? No, I still think AEW Dynamite is the best wrestling show of the week. But enough about me talking about the creative direction of WWE, because we all know the creative direction of WWE has gotten drastically better. Their pay-per-views have been absolutely amazing. But we're going to date back to December. Vince McMahon, well, actually, there was a Wall Street Journal report that basically said that Vince McMahon wanted to return to the company and thinks that he received bad advice about retiring, which I think was absolutely laughable because it goes to show you the ego that Vince McMahon has. Now, I'm reading this report from WrestleTalk. It's not really a report, but it shows the letters that Vince McMahon sent to the board of directors. Now, I'm going to be reading you guys these letters that Vince McMahon sent, and of course, the letters that the board sent back. Vince McMahon, from the first letter, is 0, and then from the second letter, he goes straight to 100, and it goes to show you the type of person that Vince McMahon is. So I'm going to be reading you guys these letters, and we're going to be dissecting all this information and, kind of giving you guys a grasp of basically what Vince McMahon wants. Now, before I read these letters, I want to assure everybody that I am not a businessman. I have no idea how the stock works at all. I am not good at that type of stuff. But if you can read through business language, I should say, you would probably understand what Vince McMahon is really implying. But we are going to basically dissect all of this information. And this is Vince McMahon's initial letter to the board, and it reads as follows. And I'm, of course, getting this from WrestleTalk. They put basically this entire thing out. Dear, and I quote, "Dear Board of Directors, I have always recognized that we have a massive responsibility to the WWE Universe. Our fans deserve the best entertainment that WWE can offer, and I thank you for your efforts to keep our company focused on that goal through its distinctly challenging year for WWE." Well, challenging, I wouldn't necessarily say challenging for WWE, because if you really think about it, WWE has made a shit ton of money in 2022. They started taking their pay-per-views internationally more often. Of course, they still do the Saudi Arabia shows, but of course they had Clash at the Castle in Cardiff, which was a major, and I mean major success. So I wouldn't necessarily say it has been a challenging year for WWE. If you can think about it, the momentum ever since Triple H took over definitely, and I mean this wholeheartedly, definitely shifted from AEW to WWE. Now, it looks like that momentum is not going to last. Now, I'm not celebrating that, but it looks like that momentum is going back to AEW. That's just my opinion, but that's a little bit of a hot take right there. Continuing on. Throughout my entire tenure with the company, I have always been committed to doing what I believed to be in the best interest of WWE and our employees, shareholders, fans, and other stakeholders. It is also why I voluntarily retired from the company during the pendency of the special committee investigation and fully cooperated with the committee and its independent counsel's process. My retirement was intended to give the special committee, its independent counsel, and the rest of the board the time and space needed to understand and respond to the allegations. Now that the completion of the special committee investigation has been publicly disclosed, I believe WWE has a unique opportunity during this critical juncture to maximize values for its shareholders and other stakeholders, specifically given the rapidly evolving media landscape in which more and more companies are seeking to own the intellectual property offered on their streaming platforms. He's basically telling you he's basically hinting at a sale of the company with these words, talking about how these companies want to own these media properties instead of paying them millions of dollars every 4 to 5 years, basically. That's what he's basically implying. Continuing on, I firmly believe that the best thing to do for all of WWE shareholders and other stakeholders is to undertake a comprehensive review of strategic alternatives. Now, when it comes to strategic alternatives, it basically implies the direction and the future of the company. So he talks about these strategic alternatives. I continue on. I am confident that our other shareholders will support this decision. As you know, the media rights subject to the upcoming negotiations are critical to strategic alternative consideration, and therefore the two initiatives must occur in parallel fashion. By combining a review of strategic alternatives with the media rights negotiations, our company can make better, more well-informed, and faster decisions. Moreover, any party that engages in strategic decisions with WWE will want to be assured that I, as controlling shareholder, am aligned with the decision-making process, basically implying that he will make the final say. But he doesn't really say that until the second letter. In other words, we must unify the company's decision-making regarding these two interconnected initiatives to fully capitalize on this unique opportunity. For these reasons, it is critical for me to rejoin the board as executive chairman to work alongside our management team in leading the exploration of strategic alternatives and media rights negotiations. And it is necessary to fulfill my commitment to doing what is best for WWE. Successfully navigating the process will require close consideration among WWE leadership and the board, as well as a clearly defined and well-executed strategy to secure the greatest value for WWE stockholders. As WWE's founder and largest shareholder, no one has a greater interest in the long-term success of WWE or is more aligned with all WWE shareholders than me. If that is not a Vince McMahon egotistical line, I have absolutely no idea what is. Continuing on, I want to be very clear that I wholeheartedly believe that WWE has an exceptional management team in place. Stephanie, Nick, Paul, and the rest of the management team have my full and unconditional support. Now, keep in mind, this statement is actually going to play a major role in the next letter that the board actually sent back to Vince McMahon. It's going to be very funny when I read that. I would support them to facilitate unified, efficient, and effective decision-making during this important period in the company's history. An announcement that I am rejoining the board as executive chairman provides a natural opportunity for WWE to announce its intention to engage in a strategic review process. In light of timing of the media rights cycle, it is important to finalize my return to WWE as soon as possible. Accordingly, I would request to hear back from you by 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, January 3rd. I intend to keep my letter and any ancillary communications out of the public domain and trust that the board will do the same. While I, of course, reserve all my rights, my strong preference is to conduct any dialogue regarding this letter privately and collaboratively. I, along with corporate counsel at Kirkland & Ellis LLP, am available to discuss any questions you may have. Thank you for your continued commitment to WWE. I look forward to working together to maximize value for our shareholders, other stakeholders, and the entire WWE universe. So this whole first letter that Vince McMahon put out implies that he wants to come back as, executive chairman of the board of directors to oversee the next media rights deal. Of course, the next media rights deal, he's talking about the next television deal, of course, that they have with NBC Universal, of course, in which they air Raw on Mondays and NXT on Tuesdays, and of course, the Fox deal, in which they air on Fridays, in which they air SmackDown. Very interesting stuff. So it goes to show you that Vince McMahon just does not give a single shit. He just wants to come back to, quote unquote, oversee all that stuff. Now, the board's response is actually very funny. I read this and I laughed my ass off, especially with the first few statements that they put out. Now, keep in mind, remember when I was reading that one paragraph in which Vince stated in that first letter, saying that, I know you guys have an exceptional management team in place. I told you guys when I was reading that was going to be playing a major role in the board's response. And lo and behold, it did. It's pretty hilarious. Now, keep in mind, Vince stated that statement in one of the last few paragraphs in that letter. The board responds, dated December 27th, and was as follows. Dear Vince, we write in response to your letter of December 20th. The first sentence, or the first statement that they put out. We fully agree with your assessment that the company's management team is exceptional, and are pleased to hear that Stephanie, Nick, Paul, and the rest of the management team have your full and unconditional support. They wasted no time to basically put over the current management team. It goes to show you that, hey, these people, the board definitely believes in the current people that are in charge of the company and clearly do not want Vince McMahon back, but it gets even better. We believe that our investors, employees, and fans agree. There is a tremendous excitement at the company and amongst our fan base, and our stock price has grown by more than 40% in just the last year. We remain optimistic about the continued success of this management team and the WWE franchise overall. We believe that your support is critical to this success. Continuing on, as you know, it is our fiduciary obligation to continue to act in a way that we believe is in the best interest of the company and its shareholders. We have always taken that responsibility very seriously, and all of our decisions are guided by this duty. With respect to your suggestions regarding a process to evaluate strategic alternatives and your role in that process, we are prepared to initiate such a process and are happy to work with you to ensure that it is the best process for the company and all of its shareholders. Indeed, we would welcome you and your advisors playing an important role in that process, including working together to identify the full range of potential alternatives and counterparties. To that end, we suggest that your bankers and lawyers meet with our bankers and lawyers in the first week of January to discuss how to best move forward together with this process. Although we welcome your participation in the launch of a strategic alternatives review process, and this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is where it gets better. It is also our unanimous view that your return to the company at this time, while government investigations into your conduct by the U.S. Attorney's Office and SEC are still pending, would not be prudent from a shareholder value perspective. I swear to God, man, these business type languages, holy shit. This determination is based on a variety of factors, including non-public information. The board, this is the key statement that the board put out in this letter. Basically, they stated, this determination is based on a variety of factors, including non-public information the board has become aware of, and the risks of the company and its shareholders, placing a greater spotlight. But I completely missed off a sentence. They basically stated that it includes non-public information that the board has become aware of, and the risks to the company and its shareholders, placing a greater spotlight on these issues. They're basically implying that they have more dirt on Vince McMahon that hasn't even leaked yet. So most likely there will be more information leaked out, possibly out the Wall Street Journal, about Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon wants to return to the company, but Vince McMahon does not give a single shit. He doesn't care, man. He doesn't care if it causes a PR issue. He wants to return to the company. But continuing on with this letter. The attached draft letter agreement provides that the board will not agree to the shareholder demand that the company file suit against you on the conditions that you confirm your commitment to repay all of the investigation-related expenses incurred by the company, and that you agree not to serve as an officer, director, or employee of the company during the pendency of the government investigations. Those conditions and the draft letter agreement reflecting such conditions were unanimously approved by the board prior to receiving your letter of December 20th, and were reaffirmed unanimously subsequent to that date. We are excited about the future of WWE and its continued success, and we look forward to working with you in the exploration of potential strategic alternatives as we continue to try to maximize shareholder value. Sincerely, the board of directors of WWE. So, in this letter that the board of directors put out, they talk about how it'd be fine if Vince McMahon would basically come back to the board. But again, they're implying that they have more information on Vince McMahon that hasn't even come out yet, which is the most important part to take away from this whole part of the letter. They have more information. What is that information? We do not know. But I genuinely had this belief, in my opinion. I genuinely had this belief that if Vince McMahon ever came back to WWE, it probably would be a PR disaster, considering the fact of all the shit that Vince McMahon has pulled throughout the years and all the stuff that had came out on the Wall Street Journal. I genuinely believe that, considering the fact that it is a publicly traded company. It is a publicly traded company, and they have somebody like Vince McMahon at the helm. That is not a good scenario, in my opinion. Now, this is business talk, and I don't know anything about business, so I may be wrong, but thinking about this, man, Vince McMahon wants to come back is definitely a detriment to the company, because a lot of fans are saying, oh my God, he's going to come back to creative. But at the same time, he's talking about strategic alternatives that he wants to make the company. But those strategic alternatives are, of course, talking about a sale, a potential sale of WWE. Now, CNBC put out an article talking about the list of potential buyers of WWE. Now, this was a couple of days before the whole bombshell Saudi Arabia rumor came out. But we'll get to that later. We are going to be reading the response letter that Vince put out. It's pretty funny, because if you compare this letter that I'm about to read to you guys about Vince McMahon, compare it to the first letter that Vince put out, it's like night and day. Vince went really calm on the first one, but his response completely goes to show you the type of person that Vince McMahon is. So Vince then responded on December 31st, writing, "Dear Board of Directors, I appreciate your timely response to my December 20th letter. However, it is surprising that you did not address what I had sought to make clear in my letter, namely that we have a unique but narrow window of opportunity to maximize shareholder value by combining the upcoming media rights negotiations with a strategic review process the board acknowledges is the right course of action for our shareholders, and that the only way to fully capture that opportunity is by having me, the company's founder and controlling shareholder, return as executive chairman at this critical time so that I can work alongside the management team to unify the decision-making related to these two interconnected initiatives. I would like to be clear that unless I have direct involvement and input as executive chairman from the outset, I will not be able to support, and this is the key information right here, ladies and gentlemen, I will not be able to support or approve any media rights deals or strategic transaction, including my commitments made by or on behalf of the company regarding a potential transaction or process. This position is not driven by self-interest or a lack of confidence in the company's management team, but rather my commitment to doing what is best for WWE and all of its shareholders, and by my strong belief that maximizing the outcome of these processes will require close coordination and unify the efficient decision-making. I sincerely hope we can work together to unlock this tremendous value potential. There is no rationale for your position that my return to the company, quote unquote, would not be prudent from a shareholder value perspective. And to the contrary, my return in the context of the next media rights negotiations and a potential value maximizing strategic transaction is necessary precisely from a shareholder value perspective, because it will allow WWE, as well as any transaction counterparties, to engage in these processes knowing that they will have the full support of the controlling shareholder. Further, the special committee of the board has concluded its investigation, presumably all of its material findings, and have been publicly disclosed by the company, and nothing has been communicated to me about any matter that would prevent me from returning to the board. So, I am pleased to see that we all agree as to the board's fiduciary obligations to act in the best interests of WWE and all of its shareholders. It remains unclear to me how the board can discharge these obligations if it does not permit me to be actively involved in helping to lead these two interconnected initiatives from within the boardroom, so that I can make a fully informed decision about whether any potential transaction creates the most value for all shareholders. I also feel that it is necessary to clearly state my position that in the light of the fundamental nature of WWE's media rights to the core value proposition and purpose of WWE, it would be improper for the company or the board to take material steps towards any media rights deal without WWE shareholder support, particularly considering that a very clear majority of the voting power explicitly opposes the company taking these steps without shareholder support. Regarding the shareholder demand letter, I am glad to learn that following a review of the shareholder demand, the board has determined that the demand does not warrant any further legal action. However, it is unfortunate that the board would seek to use its conclusion to attempt to extract an agreement from me not to return to the company. Any construct along these lines is entirely unacceptable, especially in light of the critical inflection points now facing the company. I would like to clarify that my intention to avoid the creation of any conflict of interest related to the special committee's investigation or related matters because of my return to the board as executive chairman, and consistent with my prior actions, I would not interfere with any government investigations or the special committee's and independent directors' process in cooperating with those or related investigations, and would fully support appropriate and tailored governance measures to insulate me from those matters, as well as any improvements to the company's internal controls determined to be appropriate by the independent directors. As I have previously conveyed, I also remain willing to continue to work to finalize my reimbursement of the company for its reasonable expenses incurred related to the investigation by and findings of the special committee to the extent not covered by insurance. Finally, I would like to reiterate my full support of WWE's management team and their leadership of the WWE franchise. It remains my sincere preference that we are enable a cooperative path forward so that we can navigate these interconnected processes together for the benefit of our shareholders. I look forward to hearing you back from you promptly, and in any case by no later than January 5th, 2023. Sincerely, Vince. Okay. Let's try to dissect all of this shit that Vince McMahon just said right here. Let me get a drink of water. I'm going to try to be a little bit entertaining to all of you guys. I'm going to have a little sip of a mug full of water. My voice is shot because it looked like what I was reading. I was like reading an entire fucking run-on sentence, which is absolutely crazy to me. I do not understand business lingo. I'm sorry. But the key thing to take away from this response letter that Vince McMahon put out is the fact that Vince McMahon basically is holding up his company and is forcing himself back into the board. What that basically means is that in the letter it stated that you guys cannot do any media rights negotiations because of the fact that I need final approval of it. That means I have to return to the board, and if it does not happen, then probably no media rights deal. That is absolutely insane to me because, of course, this year, WWE is going to start to renegotiate with all the television networks to renegotiate a deal to air, of course, the Raw, NXT, and SmackDown shows on their respective networks. So Vince McMahon is basically holding up, approval because he is still the chairman of WWE, even though he has announced his retirement. But Vince McMahon coming back to the WWE, as I've stated earlier, is, in my opinion, a detriment to the company because of the fact that the company was doing so well. And now we're in the talks of a potential sale of World Wrestling Entertainment. Now, CNBC, as I've stated earlier, put out an article of the potential buyers of WWE. Now, keep in mind, they put out this article a couple of days before the day in which Stephanie McMahon announced her resignation from the company, and also the Saudi Arabia rumor that had everybody absolutely afraid. But the list of potential buyers are companies that you, of course, may have known. But the title of the article states, Vince McMahon is back at WWE to ensure a smooth sale process, and here's who might want to buy it. So the key points, as they put on this article, is number one, Vince McMahon rejoined the WWE board Friday to begin a potential sale process for his company. WWE has hired J.P. Morgan to advise on a sale, sources say. Legacy media, streaming giants, and the entertainment holding companies could all end up submitting bids to buy WWE. A deal would most likely happen before mid-2023, when TV rights renewal deal negotiations will also take place. So they offered after this, they offered a whole list of the potential companies that could buy WWE. And these are corporate conglomerates, of course, you would say. But the first would be Comcast. Comcast owns NBC Universal. The second one would be Fox. The third is Disney, and Disney actually plays a prominent role later on in which when we continue this whole Vince McMahon craziness that's going on. Disney is a big suitor. Another one is Warner Brothers Discovery, which is probably the least likely in my opinion. Netflix, Amazon, Endeavor, another one to keep an eye out of, and Liberty Media. So those are all the companies that are potential suitors to buy WWE. In my opinion, based on the amount of money that WWE has made last year, because I believe they made for over like $1 billion. Keep in mind, they get revenue from everywhere. The majority of the money that they get, people think that, the majority of money that WWE makes, and AEW, quite frankly, people think that they make the majority of their money off their live gate revenue. No, that was actually in the past. WWE makes the majority of their money from their television rights deals. WWE has a deal with NBC Universal to air the Raw and NXT show. They have a separate television deal with Fox for over 5 years in which they will basically make over $1 billion. That's how much money Fox is paying WWE right now. They have a separate deal with NBC Universal with, of course, airing all the WWE pay-per-views and all the tape library all on Peacock, which was worth, I believe, over $1 billion throughout the course of 5 years as well, which is absolutely insane. So those are two separate deals that they have with NBC Universal. They have the whole Saudi Arabia deal, merchandise, sponsorships. These people make money fucking everywhere. WWE is a major corporate conglomerate. So what do I think? Now, this is before Saudi Arabia entered the picture here. So before this, I talked about who would possibly buy WWE. Now, I looked at this list, and there were only, in my opinion, 3 companies that could buy WWE, in my opinion. Comcast is number 1, Disney, number 2, and Endeavor, number 3. Now, keep in mind, this is before the Saudi Arabia bombshell rumor that came out. Keep in mind. Do I think Fox will buy WWE? the answer is no. The reason why I believe that is because of the fact that I feel like Fox kind of got shafted last year when WWE, or I should say 2 years ago, when they announced the Peacock deal. Because if you guys do not remember, back in 2020, before the pandemic started, WWE was looking to sell their pay-per-view rights because the WWE Network concept wasn't really working. Now, keep in mind, they launched the WWE Network back in 2014. The WWE Network was a concept that was really successful. But think about this, though. We are now entering the age of streaming, in which we have streaming services like HBO Max, Disney Plus, now Peacock, Amazon Prime, all of these different streaming services, Discovery Plus. All of those streaming services have multi-millions, and they're in the multi-millions of subscribers. If you compare a subscription number with Disney Plus, comparing it to the amount of subscriptions that the WWE Network had, the WWE Network had only roughly 1 million subscribers. Now, if you compare that to Disney Plus, that is absolutely nothing, and you could technically consider that a failure. So WWE back in 2020 was trying to sell off their pay-per-view rights to any company, whether that would be Fox, ESPN, you freaking name it. And of course, a year later, in early 2021, WWE announced the Peacock deal, which was worth $1 billion for the course of 5 years. So that was a separate deal from their current NBC Universal deal. So if you think about it, them selling their pay-per-view rights and the entire WWE Network to Peacock, it was a really smart business decision to make on WWE's end. A very, very, very smart decision for them to make. But I do not think Fox will buy them, considering the fact that I feel like they got shafted after the Peacock deal. Not only that, if you can really think about it, when Fox first brought in WWE back in 2019, they were going all straight forward with WWE, man. Like, they were promoting the hell out of that shit. They had a WWE backstage show on FS1. Granted, it was on a Tuesday night on a shitty time slot at 11. I clearly remember that. It was on a crappy time slot. But, again, you know, it also raises the question, is Fox really going to renew WWE considering the amount of money that they're paying? Because they're paying roughly over $200 million a year. In the course of 5 years, you have that grand total of roughly at least $1 billion. So I do not think Fox will renew them. My best bet is Comcast will buy them. Comcast makes the most sense, in my opinion, because, number one, they own NBC Universal. But also, if you think about it, NBC has been in bed with WWE for decades, since dating back at least to the late 1980s when they started doing that Saturday Night's Main Event on NBC. Of course, the only times in which WWE was not in business with NBC was from 2000 to 2005, in which they moved Raw from the USA Network all the way to the national network, TNN, which later became Spike TV. But then in 2005, they returned to the USA Network, and they had a deal with NBC Universal, and they haven't left NBC Universal ever since 2005. So, and WWE has been in bed with NBC Universal, and usually, if you think about it, it'd be a more logical decision for NBC Universal to sell off, to basically not sell off, but it'd be a more logical decision for NBCU to buy WWE, because number one, it saves them money. Why spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on a property that you have every year if you can just buy the thing outright and not have to worry about media rights negotiations? That is not a bad business move, in my opinion. Now, when it comes to these companies now, a lot of people are talking about Disney, and Disney does play a bigger role in WWE, and there was a report that, of course, Nick Khan, who is now the sole CEO of WWE, met with Bob Iger, and I'll talk about that later on. But Disney's very interesting. Now, the question that we all need to ask ourselves is Vince McMahon still going to be in charge whether Comcast or Disney buys WWE? My personal guess is no, because again, as I've stated earlier on this podcast, it is a PR disaster. It is just flat out a PR disaster. Do I think now, after Disney, I talked about one other one. That is Endeavor. Endeavor is very interesting because they are a company that is owned, or I should say they're a company that owns the UFC. Now, as stated right here, and I quote, Endeavor, run by a super agent, Ari Emanuel, could add WWE to its stable of assets after agreeing to buy 100% of the UFC in 2021. Emanuel bought UFC to increase the scope of talent agencies' business to live events. WME IMG is now a part of Endeavor, and it represents many UFC athletes as well as WWE superstars. The UFC deal has been a success for Endeavor, which paid out about 7 times 2016's $600 million revenue in 2016. UFC generated more than $1 billion in revenue in 2022. Endeavor's enterprise value is just about $11 billion, makes WWE a huge swing for the company, and the company's relatively small balance sheet would likely prevent Endeavor from winning a bit more against the media giants, but McMahon's outsized personality may fit with the brash Emmanuel and UFC president Dana White. Selling to a third party would also allow WWE to increase media rights renewals every few years. That may or may not be a positive in the long-term future of the company as media distribution ecosystem changes. So, Endeavor is very interesting because, again, they own the UFC, and never in my wildest dreams I would ever see WWE, and UFC coexist under the same umbrella. So that is a very, very interesting scenario, in my opinion. Very interesting scenario. But do I think it will happen? Probably not. Again, I'm definitely looking at either Disney or Comcast, but Endeavor can definitely play a role because they are a conglomerate as well, and they own the UFC, and the UFC has made a big amount of money in the last couple of years. UFC is very successful. Now, the thing about Endeavor is they will probably most likely keep Vince McMahon in charge, considering the fact that they kept Dana White in charge ever since they bought the company. So I do not think there will be a change of management ever if Endeavor buys WWE, but it'd be a very interesting scenario if Endeavor purchased WWE. All right. Fast forward, or I should say, as Michael Cole would say, shifting gears to the fateful night of Tuesday. So Tuesday rolls around. Now, it's safe to say that, of course, Vince McMahon, when he returned to the board, he came back with 2 former members of the board that he had previously fired back in 2020. Those 2 people being Michelle Wilson and George Barrios. So what happens is he brings those 2 people in. 2 other board members actually resigned, and I believe there were 3 other new board members that were 3 other board members that were fired. So there were 3 board members that were fired, and I believe 2 other ones that just resigned. And of course, there were new other board members that came in. Again, I do not know business lingo, but of course, 2 former board members, that being Michelle Wilson and George Barrios, came back to the company. Of course, they were formerly people in which that Vince McMahon fired. Now, fast forward to Tuesday. Tuesday is where all the shit really kicked in. We find out on Tuesday that Stephanie McMahon ended up resigning WWE. Now, this was very interesting because before Stephanie McMahon got the co-CEO position, if you guys do not remember, before all of the allegations of Vince McMahon came out on the Wall Street Journal, keep in mind, Stephanie McMahon announced a leave of absence temporarily, not permanently, temporarily, because she wanted to deal with personal issues, of course, not personal issues, but she wanted to deal with family, all that stuff. And Stephanie McMahon basically wanted a leave of absence and take a break from WWE, especially after all the things that was going on in her life at the time. Of course, Triple H suffered his cardiac event. You guys all know the situation. So, after that, the Wall Street Journal leaks all this information about Vince McMahon, all the hush money payments and the allegations about Vince McMahon come out. That led to, of course, Vince McMahon showing up on SmackDown the same night, I should say, in which all that information leaks out. Weeks later, Vince McMahon ended up resigning from WWE and announced his retirement, which led to Stephanie McMahon becoming the co-CEO of WWE. So this was pretty funny. Well, I shouldn't say pretty funny, but Stephanie McMahon announced her resignation, and she tweeted out on Twitter, and the tagline stated, "Then, now, forever, together." And she puts out a statement. So the statement states, "Dear WWE Universe, about 8 months ago, I took a leave of absence, and within a few weeks, I unexpectedly had the opportunity of a lifetime. I had the privilege to return as the co-CEO and chairwoman of the board of WWE. I cannot put into words how proud I am to have led what I consider to be the greatest company in the world, working alongside a remarkable leadership team and one of the strongest executives I have known in my co-CEO, Nick Khan. Our founder, Vince McMahon, has returned as executive chair and is leading an exciting process regarding strategic alternatives. And with Nick's leadership and Paul Triple H Levesque as chief content officer, I'm confident WWE is in a perfect place to continue to provide unparalleled creative content to drive maximum value for shareholders. WWE is in a strong position that I have decided to return to my leave and take it one step further and announce my my official resignation. I look forward to cheering on WWE from the other side of the business where I started when I was a little kid. As a pure fan, I will always remain dedicated to WWE. I truly love our company, our employees, our superstars, and our fans, and I'm grateful to all of our partners. Thank you for everything. Then, now, forever, together. This came to quite of a shock and a crazy reaction on social media. And this is why I state that. I state this because of the fact that I believe it was on the Friday before this Tuesday, so a couple of days before, there was an employee meeting, I believe. There was a report that came out that there was an employee meeting in WWE stating that Vince McMahon's return will not affect the positions of any employee or any talent. And that meeting was led by Stephanie McMahon, Triple H, and I believe Nick Khan as well. That was the first meeting. Of course, a week later, they had a talent meeting. There was a sole talent meeting backstage at SmackDown that was reported officially. So it was very shocking to state that there was a employee meeting on a Friday, and then a couple of days later, we found out that Stephanie McMahon officially resigned from WWE. Now, that is not the icing on the cake. Then all of a sudden, we tend to find out that WWE had been sold to the Saudi Arabia Investment Fund. Yeah, WWE was rumored to have sold already to Saudi Arabia. That is what we all found out hours later. And this is what it stated. So, Cassidy Haynes of BodySlam.net broke the news. And, of course, another source, I believe it was Steve Muehlhausen from DAZN, he also broke the news that WWE had sold to the Saudi Arabia Investment Fund, and their plan is to take the company private. Now, you would expect the reaction, or I should say, everybody expected a crazy and negative reaction. I included. I even tweeted out that WWE selling to Saudi Arabia is the worst decision that the company, in my opinion, will ever make. Because of the fact that Saudi Arabia is a country that has really messed up laws, and the only reason why they came to WWE, in my opinion, for that deal is to try to cover up all of the negativity of Saudi Arabia to kind of shine Saudi Arabia in a bright light. That's what I think happened. And, of course, I'm talking about the deal that WWE made back in 2018 when they had their first show, The Greatest Royal Rumble. So they announced that they sold WWE to the Saudi Arabia Investment Fund. Of course, it was reported by both Cassidy Haynes of BodySlam.net and DAZN's Steve Muehlhausen. Now, Steve Muehlhausen then a day later deleted his tweet talking about how the company would go private. Keep in mind, this is the same guy that said that Mercedes was going to show up a week before, and Mercedes did not show up. So if you kind of think about it, his reputation is kind of tarnished at this point. No disrespect. But what are my thoughts? Now, at the time that this happened, what are my thoughts on this whole situation? It is a bad look for WWE, in my opinion, because of the fact that when they made this whole Saudi Arabia deal, everybody were accusing WWE of making blood money, and rightfully so, considering the shit that Saudi Arabia does in that country and the laws that they have. So the fact that WWE would decide to sell to the Saudis is an absolutely crazy thing to think about. Keep in mind, this is at the same time in which Vince was getting sued by, I believe, one of his shareholders because of the fact that he basically fired fired, I believe it was 3 people in the board and brought in 2 new people, all that type of stuff. He was being sued at the same time. So all this information comes out, and the reaction on wrestling Twitter was absolutely crazy, and rightfully so, because of the fact, again, them selling to Saudi Arabia is an absolutely terrible decision. But at the same time, you really need to think about that Saudi Arabia has literally an unlimited amount of money. These people have billions and they're in like the hundreds of billions of dollars there. They could literally easily outbid any company that is bidding for WWE right here in the United States. And I've been seeing a lot of jokes on the internet saying, oh my God, AEW won, they're going to be the number one American organization in the world, which is hilarious to me because, yes, that'd be true. And speaking of Tony Khan, there was actually a report that was saying that the Khan family was probably going to buy WWE. Now, I'll get to that later. But here are the concerns that I have if Saudi Arabia had bought WWE and the reports that were reported on that fateful Tuesday night. I never want to, my reaction was just absolutely shocked. I was shocked. But again, what happens? There are a lot of questions that need to be asked. What happens to the talent? What happens to the women's division? Is there still going to be a women's division? What happens to guys like Sami Zayn? As you guys all know, Sami Zayn is of Syrian descent, and Sami Zayn, well documented, does not participate in the WWE Saudi Arabia shows, and of course Kevin Owens is with him on that as well. What happens to guys like Sami Zayn if WWE was sold to Saudi Arabia? It's a question that we really need to ask ourselves. It is a bad look for WWE if they had sold to Saudi Arabia. They basically sold their soul to the devil. What they did was sell their 50 plus, probably 60 plus year history to people that, number one, do not care at all about the company. All they care about is the money that they're making. That is it. They only care about the money that they're making. And keep in mind, these are people that are probably going to be putting Vince McMahon in charge, that are probably going to leave Vince McMahon in charge. I remember back in 2018 when WWE announced the greatest Royal Rumble, there was a report that came out that Saudi Arabia, they wanted WWE to bring back Yokozuna. They wanted them to bring in Yokozuna. Yokozuna had been dead for at least almost 20 years at that point. He's now dead. He's been dead for over 20 years. They wanted to bring back Yokozuna. They were basically years behind with the product. What, are we now going to be seeing Undertaker and Goldberg every year? But that again, the problem is that if they sell to WWE, they're probably going to have the full reins with Vince McMahon. And that's going to be a major issue in my opinion. And I do not want that to happen. I think them selling to Saudi Arabia is a bad look for WWE. What happens to the next TV rights deals? I believe the Saudi Arabia Investment Fund also owns a golf league, and that golf league has trouble. That golf league has trouble trying to find a TV deal. Now, I would assume that Vince McMahon would probably put in the contract that, hey, we have to get a TV deal, blah, 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 blah. And Vince McMahon is not stupid. But there's a reason why Vince McMahon wants to get the final approval on a media rights deal for WWE. That's why he stated that exact thing on that last letter. It's because of the fact that Vince McMahon wants power. Vince McMahon wants power, and that is it. Vince McMahon is not wanting to do this for the best of WWE, for the better of WWE. He only wants to do it to better himself, and that is it. No matter how many allegations will come in his way, Vince McMahon only wants to do this for the betterment of Vince McMahon, and that is it. So fast forward the next day. The next day comes around, and Ariel Helwani, along with other sources, completely debunked the rumors that Saudi Arabia had sold, or I should say, Saudi Arabia had bought WWE. In a tweet by Ariel Helwani, who is a well-known MMA journalist, he states, and I quote, "Contrary to the reports stating otherwise last night, there is no deal in place at the precise moment for WWE to be sold to Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund or any entity, sources say. The organization is still exploring all options, I am told, and this is a developing story," end quote. So, WWE completely debunked these reports that Saudi Arabia had bought the WWE. And thank Christ, because keep in mind, the outrage amongst the fan base would have been absolutely hysterical, but at the same time, rightfully so. So those rumors were completely debunked. Then later on, I believe it was that same day that there was a report that came out. I believe it was by CNBC as well. Of course, CNBC were the people that put out the list of potential buyers of WWE, that the Khan family are in the list of potential buyers for WWE. The Khan family, Tony Khan and Shad Khan. Do I think that the Khan family will buy WWE? The answer is pretty simple. I think no, they will not buy WWE. I think that's a completely, stupid thing to imagine. Now, I tweeted it out on Twitter that there are pros and cons to Tony Khan and Shad Khan buying WWE. Now, you really need to think about this. The Khan family is worth billions of dollars. They have more money than Vince McMahon himself. But I do not believe that they're going to blow their entire net worth on their own on WWE. I think that they're going to get a financial partner to buy the whole thing together, and it'd be a 50-50 split. And even if they did own WWE, I know for a fact, I genuinely believe that Tony Khan is not going to run that fucking thing. I think they're going to keep Stephanie and Hunter in charge, in my opinion. That's what I believe. But there are pros and cons to this. The pros are that, he probably would keep Stephanie and Nick Khan and Hunter in charge. The con is that there would be another major monopoly in the wrestling industry, even if WWE was still running. But at the same time, WWE is a publicly traded company, so these processes in buying these publicly traded companies takes much longer in my eyes. But it'd be a monopoly of the industry, and at the end of the day, nobody wants that because we all want options. We all want options, and for everybody celebrating that, AEW won, those are not real fans, in my opinion. Now, the jokes are funny. I'll admit, the jokes are funny. But at the same time, we'd be very hypocritical if we were happy that Tony Khan had purchased WWE or Shad Khan or the entire Khan family had purchased WWE. We'd be very hypocritical considering the fact that we've been talking all this shit about Vince McMahon. We've been talking all this shit on Vince McMahon monopolizing the industry, and then meanwhile, even though we all like Tony Khan, he's doing basically the same thing. We'd all be very hypocritical, in my opinion. We'd all be very, very, very hypocritical. But do I think that the Khan family will buy WWE? My guess is no. A day later, I believe it was a day later, that we also found out that CEO Nick Khan met with Disney CEO Bob Iger and ESPN president James Pintaro in talks on a potential sale of WWE. So I believe the ideal sale price is roughly around $7 to $10 billion, and Disney is worth like $182 billion. So like Disney's worth a lot of fucking money, so they can easily buy that shit. What are my thoughts on Disney potentially buying WWE? Disney buying WWE is interesting because of the fact that, of course, Disney literally owns everything. It took them years to buy 20th Century Fox, and now they basically own the entire Fox catalog. They own all of the X-Men characters finally. They own Marvel, they own Star Wars, I believe they own National Geographic as well. Bro, they own everything. Disney Plus has millions and millions of subscribers. It is absolutely insane. Disney, if you want to talk about monopoly, Disney is 100% a monopoly in my opinion. You have all these studio mergers with movies happening left and right. Of course, Warner Brothers merged with Warner Media to become Warner Brothers Discovery, and that's not looking good for them considering the fact that, mergers really never work in my opinion. But again, it's an interesting scenario of WWE possibly buying, or not WWE, Disney. I keep getting these things reversed, of Disney possibly buying WWE. It's very interesting. What are my thoughts on it? Do I think that they're going to be toning down the product? Absolutely. Where do I think they will end up? Now, I do not think that the pay-per-views in the entire catalog will end up on Disney Plus. My best bet is that they will possibly end on ESPN, but I heard reports that Disney is thinking about selling ESPN. I may be wrong, and if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. But my best bet is that they would be on ESPN Plus. That is just me, but I do not think, even if Disney had purchased WWE, I do not think that they would keep Vince McMahon in power. Considering the nature of all the allegations that came out about Vince McMahon, and of course Disney being a family-friendly company, I do not think it would be a good idea for them to keep Vince McMahon around. But Vince McMahon is just on the hunt, man. We got Saudi Arabia possibly being a potential bidder, and keep in mind, even though it was debunked about Saudi Arabia possibly buying WWE, that does not mean that it could not still happen, because it could very well still happen. So I'm still worried about that, because the least person that I do not want to buy WWE is Saudi Arabia. I do not want Saudi Arabia to own WWE as well, because it'd just be a very, very, very bad look on the company, and in my opinion, it'd make Vince McMahon even worse. The heat will definitely be on Vince McMahon. More heat would be on him than ever before, in my opinion. But then you fast forward to Friday. There was a talent meeting talking about how it was of course led by Triple H and of course, and I believe Kevin Dunn as well. So the meeting was led by Paul Levesque, who told talent that Vince McMahon is back in WWE to lead to a potential sale. Levesque also said that McMahon won't be re-entering the creative team, and although he's quote-unquote may have discussions with McMahon about creative, that's the key statement right there, Levesque is the one that makes the final decision. Fightful Select has provided an update, noting that Kevin Dunn also spoke to talent. According to Fightful, Dunn told talent that he's worked with McMahon for 40 years, and McMahon, quote-unquote, hasn't said a peep to him about making any changes. Dunn pretty much reiterated that Levesque's points, in which was described as a quote-unquote calm-down meeting to ease talent concerns about McMahon potentially getting back involved in things. However, it's worth remembering that WWE did hold a meeting with employees, not talent, last week, and the message was quote-unquote business as usual, and that no management would be changing, and then Stephanie McMahon resigned just 2 days later. So it seems even what's being said in these meetings is a fluid situation and things may change. Dave Meltzer reported in the Wrestling Observer earlier today that Nick Khan, WWE's sole CEO, has been the one, quote-unquote, running the company and making, quote-unquote, final decisions. The Observer also noted that McMahon has not been back at his office nor any shows since returning to the board. So it looks like, Vince McMahon is not really back at his office, but they continue on. On January 6th, using his power and majority owner, Vince McMahon put himself and former presidents George Barris and Michelle Wissons back into the company board of directors, disposing of 3 other people in the process. So, again, they're stating in this talent meeting that it's quote-unquote business as usual. It is a very, very, very weird situation. Do I believe the words that are coming out of the mouth of Paul Levesque? My best bet is no. I don't. If there's anything that we learned about, this whole sale of WWE and all the things that are going on the business side, is that anything can literally happen. Anything can literally happen. Because keep in mind, there was an employee meeting last Friday stating that it was all business as usual. And then a couple of days later on Tuesday, Stephanie McMahon, who was at the time the co-CEO of WWE, announced her resignation. Things are looking a little scary, and Vince McMahon does not give a single shit. He's coming back to this company. Does that mean he's going to be running creative? I do not know. I do not want him to. But if you really think about it, creative, when it comes to these business meetings, creative is the least of these corporate companies' concerns. It really is, in my opinion. They don't give a fuck about this creative process at all. It's the least of their concerns. But, yeah, man, that's all I got on this whole Vince McMahon story. Basically, the episode 3 of the WrestleHavoc podcast was just solely based on all of this Vince McMahon craziness that is going on. And we do not know any other further information that is going on. It is a crazy time right now in the realm of WWE. Would I say it's a scary time? I don't know. Honestly, I really don't know. A part of me says yes. A part of me says no. WWE, of course, one of the main reasons why they've been doing those budget cuts the last few years, ever since 2020, what I'm talking about is talent budget cuts, is because of the fact that they wanted to ensure a sale of the company. And it looks like they're going forward with that process. Only now is that we have Saudi Arabia possibly bidding, and they're probably still in the hunt to buy the company. And it's a very scary situation. Very scary situation. We also have other companies like Disney, Fox, Comcast, Endeavor buying the company. We do not know who will buy WWE, but the thing is, and they'll probably not listening to me, but the number one thing about this whole situation is whoever buys WWE, my biggest hope is that they remove Vince McMahon from power, in my opinion. Because Vince McMahon should not be in charge in any way, shape, or form. You can say creative all you want. I don't think he should be there, period, because of all the allegations against him. And all this information that the board has on Vince McMahon, all the dirt that they have on Vince McMahon that still hasn't been released yet, it is a bad look for him. And Vince McMahon, him wanting to come back to the company, goes to show you the type of person that he is. and he's an egotistical son of a bitch. That is exactly what Vince McMahon is. But yeah, that was episode 3 of the WrestleHavoc podcast. We talked a lot for over an hour about this Vince McMahon WWE sale, potential sale. I wouldn't necessarily say potential sale, considering the fact that it looks like the sale is definitely going through. But yeah, man, it's crazy shit. But yeah, that was episode 3 of the WrestleHavoc podcast. Of course, as I stated at the top of this podcast, the WrestleHavoc podcast, this pure WrestleHavoc podcast, is going to be the main podcast every Sunday. It will drop every Sunday. I'm still trying to look for a time frame, but I'm trying to look for a time frame to upload all my videos at the end of the day. But yeah, man, this will be the main show going forward, and hopefully you guys will stick around listening to me talk passionately about professional wrestling. But yeah, man, that was episode 3 of the WrestleHavoc podcast. Please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications, and be on the lookout for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc podcast on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the frickin' referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And also follow me on social media on both Instagram and Twitter. But as always, it is yours truly, Flaming Rick, from the WrestleHavoc podcast, signing out.